Okay, so let's unpack this. We're diving into a concept today that, well, it feels completely backward at first, maybe even a bit painful if you're right in the thick of running your business.
Right.
The idea is basically this. The more time you intentionally spend working on your business, to increase its actual value, the more personal freedom you end up creating for yourself.
And doesn't that just like fly in the face of everything? The usual experience is you pour more into it, build something bigger, and suddenly it needs even more of your time, right?
Totally.
It's that classic trap, the founder stuck in the cage they built themselves.
Exactly. And that tension, that sort of contradiction, that's really the heart of what we're getting into in this deep dive.
Hmm.
We're pulling insights from an article by Daryl Amy. It's called How Focusing on Value Creation Actually Frees Your Time. And he tackles this head on, this thing he calls the paradox of value creation.
Yeah, and our goal here is really to dig into why this paradox isn't just, a clever phrase,
Yeah.
why it's actually, according to the source, a fundamental truth.
Right.
And how making that strategic shift, changing your focus, directly translates into getting back your most valuable asset, your time.
So if you're listening, maybe you're a business owner and you feel like your business just needs you constantly, every hour, every day.
Like you're the indispensable linchpin.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Always putting out fires, making every key decision, even if, the business is actually profitable. Well, this deep dive is definitely for you. We're looking at why that happens based on this source and how the path it outlines might offer a way out of that cycle.
The article really kicks off describing that exact feeling, doesn't it? Owners who are, by all standard metrics, successful, good revenue, solid profit,
Sure.
but they're still personally tangled up in almost everything.
Right.
Every big decision, every important sale, every crisis lands right back on their desk.
They've built something successful, no doubt, but it's success that's, well, deeply dependent on them being there all the time. And the author points out this often happens because the focus has been so much on the day-to-day grind, right? Working in the business, serving the clients right in front of you, hitting those immediate targets.
Rather than stepping back and strategically working on building the kind of value that lets the company function more on its own.
Hmm.
And that, according to the source, that's the absolute key. That's the lever for freedom. Freedom begins when the business isn't, entirely tethered to the owner.
So it requires a shift.
A fundamental shift, yeah, into where you invest your time and your energy from just doing the work yourself to building the systems and the teams that can actually do the work effectively without you.
It's that paradox again, isn't it? It feels productive, and it is productive, especially early on, to be hands-on, chasing every lead, solving every customer problem yourself. The article definitely acknowledges that part.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. But it makes a super clear point. If freedom is your end game, that purely operational focus, just working in the business day after day, is just not enough long term. You have to consciously, deliberately set aside real time and resources to work on the business. That means, developing the infrastructure, empowering your people, refining the strategy.
So the company can actually stand on its own 2 feet.
Exactly. So it can genuinely thrive without your constant minute-by-minute intervention.
And that's where the paradox resolves itself, kind of, because that investment on the business, the stuff aims specifically at building value.
Mm-hmm.
That ultimately leads to the business needing less of your direct involvement in the day-to-day stuff. It starts to gain independence, which frees you up.
Yeah, and the source material is really helpful here. It breaks down exactly how this works by identifying what it calls the 4 engines that create freedom.
Okay.
These are the specific areas where that intentional work on the business directly generates options and basically buys back the owner's time.
All right, let's dig into these engines then, because the article sounds quite specific about how each one helps achieve that goal, freeing up the owner.
Okay, first up is the revenue growth engine. The source makes a strong point here. If the owner is the only one who can bring in the big deals, the only rainmaker,
Mm-hmm.
the only one finding new markets, then they're perpetually stuck. They can never step away.
Right, the business hits a ceiling based on their personal capacity.
Exactly. So the article explains that building a real revenue growth engine means systematizing your marketing and sales. It means training teams, focusing on predictable lead gen and conversion.
So growth isn't totally dependent on the owner's personal hustle or Rolodex.
Precisely. Building systems and processes for growth that other people can run instead of you being the bottleneck for every dollar that comes in.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Removing yourself as the constraint on income growth. Okay, what's next?
So the second engine is process optimization. And this one is, well, it's huge.
Okay.
The article really emphasizes documenting, standardizing, and constantly improving how things get done. This allows the business to deliver value consistently.
Without the owner having to micromanage or oversee every single step.
You got it. It streamlines things. It cuts down on errors that inevitably pull the owner back in. It speeds up training new people, clears out bottlenecks.
And like the source says, it explicitly buys the owner breathing room.
Yeah.
Okay, but I can almost hear listeners thinking, documenting processes. Seriously, I barely have time to do the actual work.
Yeah. Fair point.
Does the article give any tips on how owners actually find the time for this, essential on the business work, especially at the beginning?
It definitely acknowledges it's a challenge, but it frames it as a crucial investment, not an expense. The time you spend optimizing up front. It pays back dividends later by preventing mistakes, rework, and those constant quick questions that eat up your day. It's about making that on work a strategic priority, maybe carving out time, even if it means pushing aside some less critical in the business tasks for a bit.
Okay, so prioritizing the long-term freedom over the immediate fire drill. Got it. What's the third engine?
The third one is culture development. The source talks about this as cultivating an entrepreneurial culture within the team.
Interesting. What does that mean in practice?
It means empowering your employees, getting them to think critically, to solve problems on their own, to actually take initiative and collaborate effectively without always needing permission or direction.
So the owner shifts from being the required hero who has all the answers and puts out all the fires
Exactly.
to more of a leader who coaches and guides the team to do that themselves.
Precisely. So the team members start taking real ownership of problems and opportunities. That frees the owner from being the ultimate decision maker and problem solver for every little thing that crops up.
Yeah, I can see how that would be a massive time saver. You're leveraging the whole team's brain power.
Totally. The collective intelligence and drive of the team get harnessed for creating value instead of everything having to funnel back up to the owner.
Okay, makes sense. And the fourth engine?
The fourth is strategic innovation. The article argues that you need to embed a process and expectation of innovation throughout the company.
So it's not just the owner's job to come up with all the new ideas.
Right. Or worse, the owner being the only one reacting frantically when the market shifts, when innovation becomes more like a team sport, as the article puts it. Then the company is proactively looking ahead, it's adapting, it's creating future value organically.
Yeah.
And that seriously reduces the need for the owner's last-minute scrambles just to stay relevant.
Okay, so it's not necessarily about building a giant R&D department overnight.
Not at all.
It's more about fostering a mindset and maybe some simple systems where everyone feels encouraged and equipped to look for better ways of doing things or spotting new opportunities, kind of building innovation into the company's DNA.
You nailed it. It's about distributed innovation, not relying on a single genius at the top.
Gotcha.
So when all these engines, revenue growth, process optimization, culture development, and strategic innovation, when they're all being systematically built, measured, improved.
Right.
The article says something really pivotal happens. You're not just building a more valuable business in some theoretical sense. You are actively creating tangible options for yourself, the owner.
And options. Yeah, options are pretty much the ultimate expression of freedom in business, right? That's what this source seems to be saying.
Absolutely. When your business has those solid systems, empowered people, proactive processes, basically, because those four engines are humming along nicely, it can genuinely operate, even thrive, without your constant direct oversight day in and day out. And that's when the options become real.
What kind of options are we talking about?
Well, things like scaling up significantly, maybe selling the business for its maximum possible value, taking real extended time off,
Wow, yeah.
transitioning leadership smoothly to someone else on your team, or even pursuing strategic acquisitions yourself. These become actual achievable possibilities instead of just, pipe dreams.
The source material, I remember, has a really powerful quote around here, something like, a highly valued business becomes less dependent on you.
Yeah, that's a one.
Inside the business, you have the space, time, and budget to pursue growth through new ideas or acquisitions. Outside the business, you have the opportunity to spend more time with your family and friends.
It's a great line. It just perfectly connects that strategic work, building value and independence, with actually getting your personal time back, both professionally and personally.
Yeah, it makes that link incredibly clear. Working on the business equals freedom.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's a really crucial point the article brings up, a key warning almost. The author calls it the catch.
Ah, yes, the catch.
This kind of freedom, these wonderful options we just talked about, they don't usually happen because of some last-minute scramble, right?
No, not at all. The source is super clear on this. True freedom, maximum optionality. They don't just magically appear right before you decide you want to sell or slow down.
Okay.
It's almost always the direct result of consistent strategic investment over time in building up and strengthening those 4 value creation engines we discussed.
So you can't really wait until you're totally burned out or, ready to hit the golf course full time to suddenly start trying to build a business that runs without you.
Exactly. That work on the business,
Yeah.
it has to be an ongoing priority. It needs to be woven into the fabric of how you operate week in, week out, not just some future event you'll get to eventually.
So it's a marathon, not a sprint to the exit.
Precisely. The article actually encourages owners to think about their current business valuation, not just as a potential exit number down the road, but as a kind of benchmark, a measure of how much on the business work is maybe still needed right now. Focusing on upgrading those engines isn't a task for later. It's the work that needs attention now if you want it to compound into real freedom in the future.
Okay, so bringing this all together then. The core takeaway from this deep dive, looking at Daryl Amy's article, seems to be this. For business owners who feel trapped, the path to real freedom isn't just trying to work less in the day-to-day chaos. It's actually unlocked by strategically investing your time on the business.
Yeah, building that inherent value.
Specifically by strengthening those 4 value creation engines he identifies: revenue growth, process optimization, culture development, and strategic innovation.
And doing that systematically creates a business that's just fundamentally less reliant on the owner having to be there all the time.
Right, which makes it more transferable, more sustainable.
And crucially, creates those real, tangible options for the owner's life and their future.
Yeah.
Gives them choices.
And like the article really hammers home this kind of freedom, it's usually not just a lucky break or some frantic push at the very end.
No, it's presented as the direct payoff, the reward for consistent strategic investment in the right places over a period of time. And those options the source talks about, the genuine ability to scale with confidence, sell for top dollar, step back and pursue other things, smoothly hand over the reins.
Yeah.
They become real possibilities because the business itself has the underlying strength, those engines, to keep chugging along and thriving independently.
Okay, so if building business value truly is the key to unlocking that future freedom and having those kinds of options, here's maybe a final thought for you, the listener, to chew on, drawing directly from what this source implies.
Okay.
Well, it's just one small step, maybe something really manageable that you could take today to consciously shift your focus, even just a little bit, from working in your business, doing the doing, to deliberately working on it. Maybe it's simply identifying which one of those 4 engines feels the weakest right now. Which one needs your strategic attention the most? Just starting there.